All right. Well, short of adjusting the relative value of the dollar, what can the U.S. government do to support industry, as you put it? Like, what are the things that are going to have a positive impact on reducing costs for industry overall?
Well, the first thing I suggested at the beginning was skilled workforce. That we should. If I were the czar, I would probably close a quarter of the universities and have more engineering programs, because we need more engineers, more scientists, et cetera, more mathematicians. But it turns out that 30 or 40%, about 30% of university graduates between the age of, say, 22 and 65 at any point in time are in a job that does not require a university degree. They're working for Starbucks, they're doing something or other. And at the same time, we have shortages of welders, tool makers, precision machinists, et cetera. So I would shift those resources from university loans, many of which never get paid off, like $1 trillion worth eventually that probably won't get paid off. I'd shift that instead to apprentice programs, to subsidize the apprentice program, so more of the kids will decide that that's the right choice for them, and then we'll have the workforce that we need. So if you compare U.S. to Germany, in Germany the wage rates are about the same as ours, and yet Germany has a trade surplus of about 5% of its GDP, and the U.S. has a trade deficit of about 3% of our GDP. And what's in terms of goods. And the reason for that is that the Germans get really smart kids. They train them really well. They therefore are more productive in the use of the equipment. They buy newer equipment for them. And they have really good engineers, lots of really good engineers that design better products. And they succeed. And the world wants to buy a German product more than it wants to buy a U.S. product, because the Germans do a better job of it. I want us to be more like Germany in that sense. So it's possible, even with the current currency, even with our high wage rates, which are judged, when you compare them by the currency, to be successful. But it's a really hard slog if you do it just with skilled workforce. You really getting the dollar down is the quick way to make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that one of the big things of lowering manufacturing costs would be reducing energy costs.
But if our energy costs come down, if the price of oil comes down, then since oil is a fungible commodity and is traded all over the world, and the price of energy is going to come down everywhere. If anything, you want the price of energy to go up, at least for oil, because oil fuels the container ships that move the stuff here from there. And so if anything, you would like the price of oil to go up, which would increase the cost of freight, and the price of natural gas to come down, because the natural gas is the precursor or raw material from which polyethylene and polypropylene are made, which are then used to make resin, which is used to make plastic, and therefore our cost of making plastic goods would come down dramatically. So if you want to play the energy game, I would do that. It turns out that...
Sure. What about nuclear power?
I'm 100% for nuclear power, thermonuclear power. Turns out, just for reference, that the cost of energy as energy, so as heat, as electricity, et cetera, is about 2% of manufacturing costs. So even if you gave people electricity for free, it would reduce U.S. manufacturing costs by maybe 2%. So it'd be helpful, but not enough. But I've been in favor of nuclear forever, and the country is just barely now starting. There's some very good news that's come out about thermonuclear, that's starting to make sense. And there's several of 3, 4, 5 groups that are starting to make these small micro nuclear reactors, the kind of things you could put on a truck and deliver somewhere, and it would be sufficient for a small city or a small town or something like that, and get in place in 3 months instead of 5 years, and not go over budget. So nuclear is wonderful.
So I guess the last question I want to ask you is, for the people listening to this podcast, is there anything they can do to encourage reshoring?
Yeah. To make it happen, first, when they go into a retail store, And if you want to buy something and you can't find anything made in the United States, go up to the service desk and say, "Hey, I'd like to buy one of those made in the United States." And if they hear that enough from people, then the store will eventually start to source made in USA products. If you work for a manufacturing company, do your best to enable productivity. Do high quality, high productivity, quick delivery. If the more competitive you can make your employer, the more work your employer will get competing with offshore. Support politicians that want to do something about the problem, as opposed to just talking about the problem.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Harry Moser from Reshoring Initiative, and really appreciate you being on our podcast.
Yeah, how about let me get in the URL. So we're at reshorenow.org. Okay, and for those of you who are interested, if you have a case of reshoring that we haven't heard about, I'd love to hear about it. If you tell us about a case we don't know about, you get a free Manufacturing is Cool T-shirt, which is made in the U.S. out of U.S. cotton. And so we'd love to have you report your cases of reshoring. And if your company has the opportunity to reshore, if they're thinking about reshoring, or if they're competing, trying to get work from someone else who could reshore, then contact me and ask for help. We'd love to help you achieve that.
All right, great. Thanks so much for joining us, Harry.
Thank you both. Bye-bye. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've been afraid of about, companies pulling manufacturing out of China is that this was going to be just a short-term kind of trend, because of COVID and all of the, delays from all of the issues with shipping and supply chains and things like that. But as, that goes into the rearview mirror, people would forget, and it would seem like, oh, it's such a hassle to move out of China, and then it would kind of stop.
Right, and I think that one thing that I'd actually like to thank Xi Jinping for is helping companies realize the risks of staying in China
by kidnapping their executives.
Yeah,
and things like
and just the exit bans, and just sending in agents to confiscate their books. It's crazy what's happening to some companies, and even if it never happened to my company, I would look at it and be that's just a scary, incalculable risk, right?
It's not a new risk, though. I mean, remember what happened with the guy from Rio Tinto back in...
That was 10 plus years ago. From an Australian company. He was put in prison for leaking state secrets, even though the state secrets was just company data that they later retroactively called state secrets, and then they locked him up for that. So obviously China has retroactive laws, which is not something we have in most liberal democracies.
But I think the point I'm trying to make here is that after talking to Harry, I feel a little bit more encouraged, because I feel if he's seeing this trend predates COVID by 5 or 6 years, then COVID obviously exacerbated it. But there's a hope that it won't just fade away as people's memories of COVID fade away, because nobody wants to remember how terrible it was.
Right. Yeah. And actually, I'll give a story, because one of the sponsors for China Uncensored is MOVA Globes, and we have a couple of the globes behind us. And MOVA was telling me a story about how they left China, and it was a little bit before COVID. Mm-hmm. And they said that basically what was happening is that their production in China was getting all sorts of government scrutiny. And in their case, because they were making maps, it was it was insane, but these inspectors would come and they'd try to make sure that our maps were in line with China's worldview. They had to have the 9-dash line, and they had to show the India border such and such. And MOVA was we're not trying to make educational maps. These are just they
decorative
make
objects.
decorative maps, right? And some of them were historical maps. And
but hey, did your map from 1648 show the 9-dash line?
Yeah, I mean, and that was the kind of scrutiny they were facing, and they're just I am fed up with this, and they pulled everything out of China. But kind of like what Harry was saying, like they faced a consequence of that, which is basically that the Chinese government came in and they confiscated everything. They confiscated the factories and like their supplies that were still there, like the paper and the electronics that they used for the globe. Like it was like really like a huge setback for them to do it. And so I can just imagine like how much this is happening to like any smaller company, right? That wants to do it. But the fact, that they are doing it at all, right? I think that is encouraging.
Why possibly the risk of staying is worse than the risk of going.
Yeah. It's like that song, should I stay or should I go now? If I stay, there will be trouble. If I go, there will be double. But actually, in this case, this should go.
The funny thing is, as soon as you started to make this analogy, I saw that it was going to be backwards.
Yes. However, I had a larger point, which is that at the end of every podcast, we have to go off the rails. And so I was just helping facilitate that process.
Oh, I see. So we're going off the rails now.
We're going off the rails, and it's probably time to wrap it up.